Hi, friends. This is Maria with the Feeling Better podcast. Welcome to week 2. Congratulations. Some people might think the first week is the hardest and that it gets easier from there. I'm not going to lie to you. I would probably disagree with that. Just like starting a new diet or exercise regime, I don't think it's too difficult to muster up the will, determination, and self-discipline to jump into this with the intention to succeed, especially if you've had a big loss and truly want to break free of the compulsion to gamble. For me, I felt like the second week was the hardest. The initial shock and panic of my final big loss and the negative bank account balance had waned a little by the time week 2 rolled around. The fiery passion and understanding I felt during the first week that God was helping me still remained strong. I didn't have any doubt that He was going to use this situation for a special purpose. But my resolve had begun to waver a bit, and it was tough to shake the anxiety over my financial ruin. Week number 2 was when the doubts began to creep back in. Correction. Week 2 was when Satan, the deceiver, began to sneak forward again and attempted to trick me with a new set of lies. I want you to be ready if or when that happens to you. The enemy doesn't want you to succeed. You need to remember that. He wants you to feel like you have no option but to go back and gamble. For me, week 2 was when I found myself anxiously awaiting for the next paycheck and seeing that negative balance over and over again in my mind. I was overwhelmed by all the debt my gambling had created. Yes, I was able to turn to my vision album and use the things in my battle box to keep me going, but the money woes were still there, constantly taking up space in my brain. The entire first week, I'd managed to somehow ignore my bank accounts. I immediately deleted the emails and texts from my bank, alerting me that our account was in the negative, despite getting paid with a direct deposit. I didn't check our banking app. I couldn't pay any bills, obviously. I didn't open our budget spreadsheet. Remember, I'm the one who still continued to take care of all our finances and pay our bills. I found creative ways to make meals and managed to find an excuse as to why I didn't make my usual trip to the grocery store that weekend. It was winter, so I had no garden produce. We had no fresh fruit or vegetables, and milk was getting low. Living out in the country, we had a couple of freezers filled with meat and extra food I bought on sale in the past, plus our pantry was stocked. We weren't going to go hungry. I pulled a loaf of bread from the freezer and made a lot of comfort foods that weren't overly nutritious, but at least were filling and tasty. So my husband didn't think anything of it. But in my mind, I was exhausted and weary. I was so tired of telling lies, of hiding the truth, of feeling like I was drowning in the sea of debt I created. Yes, I knew that God was helping me through this. I knew I would eventually get out of this hole and that there was a reason I was in it. But as the weekend went by and I started the new work week, I felt heavy and burdened and overwhelmed. On Wednesday, January 18th, which was the start of my second week gambling free, I knew that I couldn't put it off any longer. I needed to take a good, long, hard look at what I'd done to our money situation. I'd read a post by someone in the problem gambling subreddit that really struck a chord with me. They said, "Are you always trading your full paycheck for a partial paycheck with the possibility of winning back to the amount of your full paycheck?" Wow, that was like a punch in the gut. What a true revelation that was. That's exactly what I did. I gambled my entire paycheck and more just to win back what would have been my full paycheck to begin with. What amazed me, looking back on things now, was how flippant I'd become about money once I started gambling. I was still in a state of shock that I'd blown $8,000. It haunted me every single moment of every single day. My husband and I both worked so hard to earn our income, and I had gambled money away like it was play money. Hundreds of times I'd logged into the casino apps and deposit $80 here, $220 there, another $170 without even batting an eye, all with the fervent intent to win more than what I'd already deposited. But only on very rare occasions did that actually happen. Somehow, I had this warped line of thinking that the casinos paid out about the same as they took in, and that my chances were pretty good of being one of those players that would eventually win a huge jackpot. Wrong. So wrong. There are articles and sources on the internet that estimate these online casinos rake in about $50 billion each year, and that number continues to grow. And there I was, gladly handing over my meager wages to them, thinking they were going to reward me with a piece of their big juicy pie. Remember, friends, their goal is to make as much money as possible while keeping the players hooked. Why? You're their revenue and profit stream. You are, not some mega billionaire or celebrity worth $75 million or a big corporation with 100 offices and 10,000 employees. Nope, it's you. You're the one making them richer while you get poorer. They're exactly like drug dealers who give you just enough to enjoy the high so that you'll come back and ask for more. And if they keep handing you a little extra here, a little sample there, then you'll suddenly find yourself hooked and ready to give up your body, your soul, your mind, and all the money you have in order to keep getting that drug. There were numerous times when I'd be spinning to land one of those lower-level jackpots where I said aloud to myself, "This is stupid. I'm wagering $300 or $400 just to win $150. But yet, I still continued to play. Because right when I was about to give up and move to a different game, or maybe even shut it down to take a little break, I'd land a decent win of $40 or $60 or $100 or whatever, and it would propel me to keep going. Or the reels would spin and land with 2 blue gems on the pay line and the third blue gem just slightly above it, not hitting a big jackpot, but coming very close. It would make me think, oh, I almost had it. Does that mean it's about to strike? It must be getting ready to hit. I'll just play a little longer and see if I can land that. So I'd keep playing. Whether you were chasing jackpots like me, or you played games that randomly paid out some kind of bonus, the premise is the same. The slot game dangled a big win over your head like a sword of Damocles, and you gladly sat under it, hoping to catch it without seriously injuring yourself. The odds of that happening, my friends, were nearly impossible. Some of those progressive jackpot games I played were $4.50 per spin. Others were $9 spins. I'd tap the button over and over and over and over, not thinking each time that I was handing over this multi-billion-dollar company my humble paycheck in an attempt to win money that would essentially put back into my bank account what I'd already had there to begin with. And that's if I actually went through the withdrawal process, which oftentimes I didn't. In less than a minute, I could wipe out $100, sometimes more. And weirdly, I'd feel elated if, in my attempt to win a big jackpot, I'd strike one of those $150 jackpots. To use an old business phrase, I was stepping over dollars to pick up nickels. I didn't think about how it was a full day's work or two that I was blowing in one sitting. I didn't put it into perspective and stop to make myself think that I was taking 15 hours of my hard work and gambling it all in less than 1 hour. Looking back now, I can see how easily I fell for the enemy's lies. In addition to the very sophisticated way the slot games triggered my dopamine rushes and created very real neurological responses that kept me playing, I also fell for the trickery of the devil's lies when he continued to whisper to me that there was no other option than to just continue playing. So, what finally prompted me to sit down and look at my finances at the start of that second week? Well, it's a story that shames me to talk about. My young niece had sent me a message. A few years before, she'd had open heart surgery to correct a defect in her heart. She's doing great now and thriving really well, And that week, she took it upon herself to raise money as part of a kids' fundraiser for their local chapter of the American Heart Association. She messaged me and asked if I'd consider donating a small amount to her fundraising campaign. At any other time, in any other year, I would have written her back an encouraging message full of love and gratitude that she was alive and healthy, and donated a very generous amount to her fundraiser. As a Christian, I always loved donating and giving to charities, especially when it came to supporting my friends and family. But at that moment, I didn't even have a single dime in my name. I knew that if I messaged her back apologizing and letting her know that I couldn't even spare $1, she'd accept that and move on. But my sister wouldn't. She'd know something was up and question it, because that was so unlike me to decline the opportunity to help. Plus, how could we not even spare $5 for the worthy cause? I wasn't ready to talk about my gambling addiction with friends or family. I felt embarrassed, ashamed, and humiliated. I just didn't have the strength or the mental capacity to have those conversations. My sister and I aren't really that close, and I couldn't fathom how I'd even begin. So I didn't answer my niece's message, which she sent via social media. I just deleted it and pretended I didn't get it. Right then, I could see so clearly how Satan used gambling not just to make me addicted, not just to ruin my finances, and not just to shake my faith and make me doubt God's will, but he also managed to strip away the fruits of my Christian spirit. Christian believers, when our faith is strong and true and we live with Christ in our hearts, our spirit reflects that. Proper care, nurturing, and cultivating of our roots in Christ produces a good harvest of fruit. Galatians 5:22 and 23 states, "But the fruit of the Spirit is love, joy, peace, forbearance, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control." Nothing about my time as a gambler reflected joy, peace, goodness, gentleness, or self-control. And now, here I was in the aftermath, hiding out from replying to my little niece because I couldn't even afford $5 or $10 to donate to her fundraiser. I knew in that moment that I couldn't avoid it any longer. I had to address the financial aftermath of my gambling addiction downfall. Earlier, in that same chapter of Galatians, the Apostle Paul explains, "So I say, walk by the Spirit, and you will not gratify the desires of the flesh. For the flesh desires what is contrary to the Spirit, and the Spirit what is contrary to the flesh. They are in conflict with each other, so that you are not to do whatever you want." Galatians 5:16 and 17. Whether you're a Christian or not, I think you can easily understand what Paul meant by flesh. Remember how I described it earlier as a black, dark, ugly thing inside me that seemed to spread like a cancer the more I played? That ugly thing began steadily growing inside me when I fell for Satan's tricks and lies. It's our own physical nature that gives into temptation. Christians call it sin or flesh. And Paul tells us that it's always contrary to God's Spirit, the Holy Spirit, that also resides within us. You've probably heard the quote or seen the meme that depicts the old Native American story of two wolves. There are different variations, but it goes something like this. There are two wolves constantly fighting each other in every man's or woman's heart. One is the dark wolf. The dark wolf is anger, greed, jealousy, resentment, fear, envy, doubt, lies, ego, self-pity, and false pride. There is also the light wolf. The light wolf is love, joy, patience, kindness, forgiveness, hope, humility, generosity, truth, and compassion. So if they're constantly fighting each other, which one wins? Of course, it's the one you feed. How do you feed your wolves? Fill your heart and mind with the things they desire more of. You feed your dark wolf with more of what it wants. more anger, more greed, more fear, doubt, resentment, etc. As you feed it, it grows bigger and stronger, eventually overpowering the light wolf and dominating every aspect of your life. But as Paul explained in that passage from Galatians, if you walk by the Spirit, meaning if you feed your light wolf, then you will stop gratifying the hunger and desires of the dark wolf inside you. Starve it long enough, and it will grow so weak that it will no longer have any power over you. Eventually, it will die. Week 2, Battle Plan, the enemy's playbook. Get to know your adversary. Again, for me, it was the second week that Satan's lies began creeping back into my thoughts. There's no way you're going to bounce back from a $30,000 debt load. You can't work and earn your way out of that. Remember how easy it was to land a $2,500 jackpot? You built up your bank to $8,000 once before. You can do it again. Which would you prefer? Working like a chump for the next 2 years, grinding away at that huge number? Or spending a couple $100 in a couple of hours to land a big jackpot or two? That's the only logical way you're going to get out of this anytime soon. Lies. All lies. Satan's battle plan of lies might have sounded like the truth, but it wasn't. It wasn't that easy at all to land a big win. I'd been a gambler for 6 months, which I know might be a minuscule amount of time compared to some compulsive gamblers who might be listening to this. But believe me, I packed in 6 years' worth of heartache, stress, loss, and financial ruin in those 6 months. But in all those 6 months of near constant online gambling and tens of thousands in deposits, I only had a substantial win 4 times. And those substantial wins were never that big compared to my debt. All were between $2,500 and $3,500. There were a handful of other times when I accumulated a decent bank from smaller wins, but I only managed to withdraw those and keep them processing without reversals twice. That was only because the burden of the first 2 high-interest payday loans I'd taken out weighed heavily on me. The third time I'd taken out a loan from the same company, I was never able to pay it off in one lump sum like the other 2 times. Talk about regrets. Each month now, I have a $550 payment towards that stupid loan, and it automatically comes out of my account, so I can't even make the choice to not pay it. So along with the lie that it's easy to win big, it's also a lie that it's easy to cash out a big win. And, let's be honest, it wasn't easy to stay away from the online casino even after those times I cashed out. I always ended up depositing more. None of it was easy. The last 6 months were the hardest I'd ever experienced in my entire life. It was all-consuming and it was incredibly stressful. It was trauma in a way that I'd never experienced before. When I hit that lowest moment of complete breakdown and utter submission to God, that was a blow to the enemy. Of course, it didn't feel like it to me, but that was, in fact, a victory. I'd made the decision once and for all to stop, because I now understood that continuing to gamble would only cause more financial loss and more pain. I want to remind you that Satan is not a cute little character in a red outfit with a cape and horns, breathing fire and holding a pitchfork. He is the leader of all the demons, the ultimate enemy of God, and his goal is to ruin and destroy everything that God created. Because God loves you, and because you're made in his image, that means Satan wants to bring you down too. If you're listening to this and you're a little confused or unsure of who Satan really is, let me explain. Before God created humans, he created angels. Angels had greater power than human beings and lived in the spiritual realm with God. They had specific roles and duties and were in charge of many different things. Satan was once a beautiful angel. You might have heard the name Lucifer, right? We don't know for certain that Lucifer was his actual name, but there's a verse in the book of Isaiah that refers to him as Lucifer, which translated from Hebrew means morning star or shining one. Yet he's also called Satan in the Bible, which literally translates to adversary or enemy. There are several other names used to describe him in the Bible, like serpent or deceiver or accuser. The Bible, throughout various passages, describes Satan as one who was initially created to be very good, full of beauty and light. But he became envious of God's power and authority, and so he convinced a third of the other angels to join him in a rebellion and attempted to overthrow God. Of course, that didn't work. So in punishment, God banished him and those other angels who rebelled alongside Satan out of heaven and down to earth. Now, here's what I want to explain that most of you, even Christian believers, may not understand. Just because Satan no longer has a place in heaven and has been banished here to this world does not mean that God no longer has authority over him. If you listened last week to the video in your battle box by Pastor Craig Rochelle, then you heard the passage from Luke 22 where Jesus tells Simon Peter, Satan has asked to sift you like wheat. Satan literally came to Jesus and asked permission to test Simon Peter, to shake him up, to put him through trial, to rattle his faith in pain, regret, and humiliation. And Jesus allowed it. Why? Well, you've got to go back and watch that video. Hint, there's a purpose for it. You probably also know the story of Job, where Satan stood before God to present himself before him. That's when they discussed Job's faith and righteousness. And Satan suggested that Job only had faith and righteousness because God blessed him abundantly. Job was healthy and wealthy and had livestock and grain and many children and lived a good life. Satan insisted that if it was all taken away, Job would turn his back on God. So God gave Satan permission to afflict Job with sores and kill off his livestock and his children and to take away everything he had in order to test his faith. Job, while full of confusion, despair, hopelessness, and grief, still maintained his faith. So in the end, God blessed him with even more than he had to begin with. Job had passed the test, and Satan was proven wrong. The point I'm trying to make is that Satan doesn't do anything without God's permission. Think of it like this illustration. Imagine there was a young man who was hired on at the biggest, most successful corporation in the world as an intern with great potential. Over the years, he became the shining star of the entire company. He was smart and dedicated and attractive and skillful and put in years of loyal hard work. After a while, he was promoted to VP. But as time went on, he thought he should be greater than VP. He thought he should be the CEO. Never mind that the true CEO created the company from the ground up and used his own resources to build the company. He was the one that hired the intern and then made him VP. But the VP felt like he was better than everyone else in the company. So he began slyly orchestrating a rebellion. He convinced a third of the company to join him in overthrowing the CEO. But the plot failed, and instead of firing the guy or even prosecuting him in some way, the CEO mercifully banished him and his rebellious colleagues down to the basement to work in the mailroom so they could still work and have a job. The former VP, who didn't have any other options as there was nowhere else for him to go with his tarnished reputation, had no choice but to head down and work in the mailroom to be in charge of all the incoming and outgoing mail and packages. He was also assigned various odd jobs around the company. Whenever the CEO called him up to the top floor corner office to check in, the guy would be super respectful and obedient, always making sure that his job was done correctly, because he believed that someday he'd get another chance to overthrow the CEO, and he wanted to play the part in order to stay on the payroll. In the meantime, though, he'd bide his time, plan carefully, and cunningly go after the boss's favorite and most important employees by attacking them in ways that tripped them up or caught them off guard or affected the success of the business. The CEO knew this, of course. He saw everything the old VP did, and he knew his character. In fact, the CEO had a very intricate, well-devised plan of his own in place to thwart the rebellious man and grow the business even more. But for now, he was going to let this play out. He knew he could turn this situation into something that worked to the benefit of those who loved him and worked for him. No one else knew of this plan, but it was a brilliant one. The narcissistic ex-VP down in the mailroom thought he had the upper hand, but in reality, the CEO was always 5 steps ahead of him. That's a crude analogy, of course, but you get the idea. God doesn't just love you, He adores you. You're His pride and joy, His creation. He molded you and trained you and blessed you from the very moment you were born. The fact that you're here listening to this is proof that He loves you. You're not here by accident. He wants you to succeed, overcome, and remain steadfast and faithful. But because He loves you as one of His own, that puts a target on your back. You might not know right now why God allowed your attack to take place, but one day you will. God might have called Satan up to use him and test you in your faith like Job. Or perhaps it was to fulfill a greater purpose like Peter. Of course, whenever Satan gets an assignment from God or has the opportunity to sneak attack you, he's going to jump at the chance and give it everything he's got. Remember, his ultimate goal is to bring God down. But this time around, as he plans his next rebellion against God, he wants more than just 1/3 of the angels. He wants as many human beings as he could possibly get to rebel against God with him. He wants to lure you away from God and convince you to join him in sin and darkness. And he'll use every weapon at his disposal in order to achieve that. The most effective one, of course, is lies. Maybe you're listening to this and considering that perhaps this podcast isn't for you because you honestly don't believe in God and you definitely don't believe that Satan is real. If that's the case, I respect that. But I can tell you one thing with absolute certainty. If you continue gambling and don't give it up, you'll find out soon enough that the devil is very, very real. And when that time comes, I hope you'll come back here. Now that I officially stopped gambling, I had to continually remind myself that winning was a lie. There was nothing about any of it that painted a picture of winning. I'd lost way more than I'd won. The reality was this. I was much worse off after I started gambling than I was before I started gambling. And thankfully, now that I've had some clarity and wisdom regarding this addiction, nothing Satan whispered to me could erase or even blur that understanding. It remained crystal clear to me. I pray it does for you too. Week 2, Battle Plan, God's Intel. The truth about obedience. It's imperative to remember and understand that life isn't all about money or wealth or financial security. I know plenty of people who don't earn much, who live humble, frugal lives, and are ridiculously happy and content. I now found myself in a place where I could see and discern the spiritual battle taking place, and I knew that it was God who blessed me with those wins. Luck didn't have anything to do with it, and He wasn't going to bless me with any more. If I went back to playing, I was going to lose. That was the bottom line, and I knew that in my heart. As part of the recovery process, it's crucial that we get our minds right about money. There's nothing inherently wrong with money. We need it to pay for housing and utilities, to pay bills like insurance, to buy food, clothes, medicine, toiletries, etc. It's also not wrong to use money for pleasurable things, for vacations, for things to enjoy and to make happy memories with. A boat, a cottage up north, some new furniture for the living room, a motorcycle. I said it earlier that it's the love of money that leads to a miserable life and a departure from God's will. Hebrews 13:5 says, "Keep your lives free from the love of money and be content with what you have, because God has said, 'Never will I leave you, never will I forsake you.'" Why does God say that? What happens when humans love money? I think you know the answer to that. Greed can set in pretty quickly. I would have never, ever considered myself a greedy person before, but that's what I'd become thanks to gambling. Greed that I didn't even know I had inside me sprouted up seemingly out of nowhere. Greed nudged me to reverse that $8,000 withdrawal and continue playing it, trying to win an even bigger jackpot. But as I said before, it wasn't the first time I reversed a withdrawal. I'd done it twice before, too. Let me tell you about the second time I reversed a withdrawal in the exact same situation less than a month before. You'd think I would have remembered that and made better decisions the third time, but nope, I sure didn't. The second time, while not as much money, was a terrible, awful moment that set my final downfall in motion. It was the moment I realized that I was no longer playing for the win, that I didn't even care about the win. I just felt compelled to play, regardless of the loss. I'd known afterward that I would only go downward and deeper into the hole, eventually hitting rock bottom. I could see it coming. It was the night before Christmas Eve, December 23rd, and that evening I'd accumulated $1,700 in one of the progressive slot games from a few smaller jackpots that I'd managed to hang on to. Correction, God allowed me to hang on to. I cashed out $1,500 of it and kept $200 in my bank. I immediately put a $5 daily spend limit so I wouldn't be tempted to cancel the withdrawal and play it. I didn't feel right about gambling on Christmas Eve or Christmas Day, so at least I had a tiny smidgen of conscience left in that regard. Yet the entire Christmas weekend, gambling and money were all I thought about. I kept checking the app to see if the withdrawal was processed. To be honest, thinking back to that weekend wrecks me to the core. Sin is so ugly and shallow and selfish. The birth of Christ is everything to me, and I usually love celebrating Christmas. But this year, I couldn't get that $200 I had sitting in my player bank out of my mind. Honestly, if this story doesn't showcase God's grace, nothing will. Finally, the first day after Christmas arrived. It was a Monday, and we had the day off work because Christmas had fallen on a Sunday. I woke up early with an excitement that only compulsive gamblers can understand. While my husband slept in, I made coffee and got myself comfortable in my favorite chair, with my heart beating with anticipation. Before I opened the app, though, I prayed and begged God fervently to help me get a win. Now, looking back, of course, I absolutely cringe with disgust at the thought of those prayers. I prayed because I truly just wanted to be done with it all. I was over gambling. I couldn't take the stress, the financial insecurity, the debt, and the sleepless nights anymore. All the credit cards were maxed out, and our savings were gone, and I'd just taken out that third payday loan of $1,800 with the 700% interest rate. I'd been setting my sights on New Year's Day to be my clean slate. I was determined to make 2023 a gamble-free year. I didn't expect or need a win to take care of the entire $30,000 in debt. I just needed enough to pay our bills, to pay off that heavy loan, and pay up the minimum payments on our credit cards. I just needed some hope. I kept praying, Lord, please bless me, not because I deserve it, but because you are full of grace and mercy, and you are the God of hope. If you could please just do that for me, then I'll put it all behind me and start fresh and be rid of these chains that hold me prisoner. Please, I just need some hope. I removed the spend limit, which came off immediately, and began playing. Lo and behold, after about an hour, I hit a jackpot worth $2,955. I immediately fell to my knees, thanking God over and over and over and over, relief flooding my heart and my mind. I was so grateful, so grateful. I felt the weight and burden lifting off of my chest. It wasn't enough to fix my entire financial problem, of course, but it was enough to get me on track. I had $62 left in my casino bank before my win, and I didn't even care about playing it down to an even number, which is what I usually did before withdrawing. I immediately went and requested a withdrawal of $3,017. Combined with my withdrawal from the day before Christmas, I'd have over $4,500 landing in my bank account. I had been saved, and I was done with gambling once and for all. Or so I believed. 5,000 times since that moment I clicked the submit button on the withdrawal, I asked myself why I didn't do what I'd done the few nights before. The same thing I should have done with the $8,000 withdrawal 2 weeks later. I should have just immediately put a spend limit in place so I wouldn't be tempted to cancel my withdrawal, just like I did previously. But I didn't. You can probably figure out the ugly decision I made later that day. In the late afternoon, my husband decided to take advantage of the day off and do some bow hunting at the back of our property. Finding myself with a couple hours to myself and feeling the dopamine rush of winning a big jackpot earlier in the morning, I opened up the app to see if my withdrawal had been processed. The first one I requested before Christmas had been approved sometime overnight, but the second withdrawal was still hanging there, right next to the little trash can icon that allowed me to cancel and reverse it if I wanted. I didn't do it at first. Instead, I dipped my toe in the water by just going to look at what the jackpots were sitting at in each of the games that I like to play. I don't even want to finish this story, but I'm going to, so that you can feel and see and cringe with disgust at the very thing I'm sure other compulsive gambling addicts can relate to. Yet again, I took God's gracious blessing that He'd given me and I threw it away. I opened up one of the games, a $9 per spin double gem progressive jackpot game, and saw that the second level jackpot with the purple amethyst was sitting at $1,159 and not moving. The progressive amount of the jackpot wasn't increasing. I knew immediately what that meant. It meant that the jackpot hit its max threshold and couldn't go any higher. It also meant that it was probably very close to paying out. I'd seen that a few times in the past, upon entering the game and finding it stuck there. Within a half hour or so, it had paid out to another player. You can see this because when one of the jackpots is won by a different player, the jackpot flashes reset so that everyone knows that someone had won it. That jackpot tier then resets to its minimum before building back up again. Satan snuck in at that opportune moment to nudge me. How much more could I pay off with an additional $1,000? It was obviously so close to paying out. I could see all the other jackpot tiers increasing in speed and intensity as they rolled over, which meant other people realized the slot was close to paying out and they were trying for those 3 purple gems as well. I jumped in at just the right moment to have a shot at it. Problem was, I didn't have any more money left to deposit. But I did have my withdrawal pending. I'll just cancel the withdrawal and play $100 or so. Maybe 2. It would still be worth it to win an extra $1,100. That, dear friends, is how I convinced myself. Greed. It's food for the dark wolf. I wish to God that I would have walked away, shut it down, remembered all the things I'd be able to pay off with my withdrawal, and thought about the pain of loss. But that's the thing about compulsive gambling. You forget the pain of loss and the excitement of a possible win. But most of all, I wish I would have stopped to consider my goal of walking away from gambling in the new year. I was only 5 days away from 2023, and I had $4,500 to start 2023. It would have been the perfect place to end my story. I would have felt amazing, rejuvenated, encouraged, and enthusiastic when I woke up on January 1st. But I didn't do any of those things. I tapped the trash can icon and canceled my withdrawal, and that money was instantly back in my player bank ready to go. Not giving it another thought, I began playing. Slowly at first, with my eye on the balance, but the lure of the jackpot became irresistible. I increased my pace, frantically tapping the spin button along with everyone else as I attempted to get the 3 purple gems on a pay line. After playing for about 20 minutes, I started to get frustrated. Each spin was $9, so just like that, I'd spend $500. Now my bank was sitting at $2,500. I still could have stopped and walked away and had enough money to pay off my big loan and a couple of bills. But I didn't. I'd slipped into my trance-like state of complete numbness, with no other focus or intent other than winning that jackpot. 10 more minutes, I told myself. But even after 10 more minutes of playing, no one had won that second-tier jackpot. Now I was down to $2,100. The numbers on the other jackpot tiers increased faster and faster as all of us who were playing maintained our intensity. Tap, tap, tap. I hit the spin button over and over with my thumb. $9 bet. Another $9 bet. Another $9 bet. Again and again and again. I won $30 here, $60 there, up and down as I played. But the trend definitely went downward as my balance steadily decreased. When I got down to $2,000, I decided I'd keep playing just a little longer because the lowest tier jackpot was approaching $390 and was likely to pay off any moment. In that game, it typically paid out before $400. At least if I could just get that, it would help bring my balance back up. But as soon as I had that thought, someone else must have gotten those gems on their pay line because that tier's jackpot had started flashing reset. I slumped in my chair, dejected and nervous. I knew I needed to stop. I had to stop. If I didn't, I'd continue to lose even more. It didn't matter, though. None of us had won the $1,159 that was still sitting there taunting us. Not to mention, I'd had a couple of near misses when the 3 purple gems almost landed on a pay line, but not quite exactly. The last gem had been just a little bit off. I now know that near misses are not an indicator of me almost winning. Rather, it's a sneaky tactic the casinos use to make a compulsive gambler think he or she was close to winning, which would compel them to continue playing even more. When I'd played down to $1,500, the awful, dizzying realization of what I'd done finally set in. At that moment, I shifted from hopeful expectation of a win mode to desperate to win back some of what I lost mode. Chasing losses. It's the ruin of every addicted gambler. But the shift in my mental state didn't shift my win-loss ratio. I continued downward. Nothing. Nada. Zip. No more wins. No more jackpots. No more accumulation. Just loss after loss after loss. I have no idea why I continued to play. That purple amethyst jackpot just sat there, unclaimed, unwon, and I honestly thought I could nail it. After I'd played down to zero, I didn't just feel the massive loss of money. I felt like I'd lost my soul. I couldn't understand how only hours earlier I'd been on my knees thanking God in gratitude with $4,500 in withdrawals that would have put me back on the path to fixing this mess. And there I was now, with nothing but the $1,500 I withdrawn before Christmas. Even that would only cover my deposits, with maybe $100 or $2 left over. Side note, when I went back into the app the next morning and checked the game, the jackpot was still sitting there at that same number. People played it all night long, and no one had won it. It just goes to show you what a sneaky little tactic the casinos use to get people to dump money into the game. I spent the rest of that evening in bed, making the excuse to my husband that I felt sick. It was no lie. All that money gambled away just like that. As I lay in bed, I had my earbuds in playing the Psalms, trying to find some comfort or explanation or understanding of what had just happened. One psalm in particular grabbed me because I knew that I had disappointed and angered God. I had crumpled and given into sin when I should have been standing tall in gratitude and blessing. This was the Psalm of David, likely right after he committed adultery with Bathsheba. Lord, Do not rebuke me in your anger or discipline me in your wrath. Your arrows have pierced me, and your hand has come down on me. Because of your wrath, there's no health in my body. There's no soundness in my bones because of my sin. My guilt has overwhelmed me, like a burden too heavy to bear. My wounds fester and are loathsome because of my sinful folly. I am bowed down and brought very low. All day long I go about mourning. My back is filled with searing pain. There's no health in my body. I'm feeble and utterly crushed. I groan in anguish of heart. All my longings lie open before you, Lord. My sighing is not hidden from you. My heart pounds. My strength fails me. Even the light has gone from my eyes. Psalm 38, 1-10. But it was a line from the next psalm that truly gutted me with the truth. When you rebuke and discipline anyone for their sin, you consume their wealth like a moth. Surely everyone is but a breath. Psalm 39:11. Oh, I knew then. I knew. Adding up the money I just lost with all the money I'd also lost since July, it was exactly like that. Have you ever had a problem with moths eating your clothes or maybe your cabbages? People who live in the country deal with them all the time. At first, it's just a small hole here and there. But then the next time you turn around, the entire garment is in tatters, or the whole head of cabbage is ravaged, eaten away with such voracity that there's barely anything left. I had no doubt whatsoever that no matter how much I won going forward, or how many jackpots I landed, or how many times I'd initiate a withdrawal, I would continue to gamble it and push us deeper into the financial hole. No matter how often I'd win from that point on, I would only continue to lose. During my time as a gambler, I've had so many regrets. From December 16th to January 10th, I'd thrown away more than $10,000. Just sitting here on my computer writing that makes my heart hurt. My story could have had a completely different ending had I made better decisions. Yet, had I withdrawn all that money instead of playing it, would I have written my book and launched this podcast? Probably not. The words I wrote and now speak here were born of pain and sorrow. Again, there was purpose in that pain and sorrow. I have to remind myself of that even now. By the time New Year's Eve rolled around, I'd lost all of my excitement, determination, and intent for a gambling-free 2023. Over the next 10 days, I'd used the $1,500 withdrawal that finally landed in my bank account, which really only ended up being $150 after all my deposits finally cleared, along with the last payday of the year to take care of January's mortgage and utilities. And you know the rest of the story. In a desperate attempt to regain what I'd lost, I'd put our bank accounts into the negative in a way that even a paycheck couldn't rectify. Moths were everywhere, eating up the last remaining vestiges of any money that we had. Here is a hard truth that I need to make clear. Yes, God is merciful. God is graceful. God is love, and He saves. Sometimes, though, saving us means discipline and pain. There's always a purpose for that pain. In my case, it was to get me to stop once and for all and to write my book and help others. Instead of shutting it all down for good, like I knew God had wanted me to before Christmas, I disobeyed. I knew that from that point on, my spiral downward toward destruction was going to hurt. It was going to be painful. I understood quite clearly that I would soon hit rock bottom, and the hard impact was imminent. Not only was it imminent, but I was aware it was going to be so painful. I was scared, of course. There was no sense in praying for God to withhold what was inevitable. Why would He? If I didn't stop gambling after He answered my prayers and provided money to help get me back on my feet, then His only other option to get me to stop was to make it painful. I knew that with 100% certainty. Here's an illustration to drive that point home. Imagine you're a parent with a young 3-year-old child. You live on a very busy road with lots of fast, heavy traffic. One day, you both step out of the house with the intention to do some errands, and the child runs out toward the road, laughing and trying to get you to chase them. You panic, yell, and run after them, snatching them up as they're mere feet from the curb. You grab a hold of them and hug them tightly and explain why they can't do that it's dangerous and they could get hurt. The next day, you again go to leave, and the kid does it a second time. Once again, you yell and run after them, grabbing them by the arm just as they're mere feet from the road. You hug them fiercely, telling them over and over how much you love them and you don't want to see them get hurt. You even bring them back inside and give them their favorite ice cream while you explain the dangers of road traffic and instruct them to never ever do it again. They nod in understanding and promise they won't. But the very next day, as you step outside with your child, yet again they dart toward the street, laughing and insisting it's fun and they love running. This time around, though, you grab your child, yell ferociously, and give them a good hard smack on the rear that you know stung. Then, as they're red-faced and sobbing, you march them back up to the house and order them to their room until bedtime. You tell them no toys, no TV, and definitely no ice cream for the rest of the day. Folks, as the parent, do you love your little son or daughter any less after they've been disobedient? Of course not. You may even love them more when you realize how badly that situation could have ended. Did you punish them for no reason, simply because you just wanted to hurt them or see them suffer? No. You smacked their bum and sent them to their room because doing it the nice way with love and kindness and hugs obviously didn't work. They still disobeyed and did what they knew you didn't want them to do. And their continued disobedience could have gotten them hurt or even killed. You had to put a stop to it once and for all to ensure they never again felt the desire to run out into traffic. Or if they did feel that urge, maybe they'd pause and remember the pain of punishment and turn back around. One of the very first verses I memorized when I first became a Christian was Hebrews 12:11. The funny thing was, I'd been in a small group for fitness and weight loss, and this was one of the verses they repeated to help keep us motivated. Ha! I thought I knew what this meant back then, but now I know the true meaning behind it. All discipline is painful rather than pleasant. Later, it yields the peaceful fruit of righteousness to those who've been trained by it. Listen, peeps, I'm no theologian. I am not a Bible scholar or pastor. I'm just telling you what the good Lord put on my heart to tell you. He loves us. He cares for us. He's there to save us and to snatch us from danger and to help us out of a dark situation, to lift us up out of our addiction and to rescue us from Satan's attack, to prepare us for the bigger purpose. But if we continually disobey and do what we know in our hearts he's telling us not to do, he's going to use pain to get our attention and ensure we stop. Not because he's a mean or ferocious God who wants to strike us down, but because he knows we can't continue to keep doing what we're doing, because it could end up with us bankrupt, homeless, or suicidal. God has a greater plan for us than that. As I said in chapter 1, there's always purpose in our pain. The purpose might just simply be to save us from something much, much worse, perhaps even death. Week 2, battle plan, weaponry. Lean on Psalms. What are Psalms? If you're not a Christian, then the best way to explain it is that they're a collection of verses in the Bible that are a cross between a poem and a song. For the record, it's pronounced Psalms because the P is silent. They're a form of prayer that in the old time of King David were sung, often accompanied by instruments. Some of them praise God in worship. Some of them are prayers in time of trouble. Christians have been leaning on the Psalms for centuries. They're favorites in time of trouble or turbulence, or when you want to feel peace or joy. As a whole, they teach us about the character of God. Even if you aren't a Christian believer, You've probably seen movies or instances when people in trouble began praying, "The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He makes me lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside still waters. He restores my soul. He leads me in the paths of righteousness for his name's sake. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I shall fear no evil, for you are with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me." That's from Psalm 23. My favorite way to lean on the Psalms is to listen and read them at the same time. After 15 or 20 minutes of that, I'll often close my eyes and then just listen. The easiest way to do that is with the YouVersion Bible app. If you haven't downloaded the app yet, I recommend doing it now. After downloading it from the App Store, tap on the Bible icon at the bottom, then use the little button in the upper left-hand corner to look for Psalms. Start at the first one. You'll notice there's a sound icon at the top. That means it'll play for you. The narrator is Max McLean, my favorite. His voice is so soothing and authoritative. I prefer to use my phone to read or listen to the Psalms so that I can have them handy at all times, and the app is the easiest way to do that. But you can also find them on Audible, iTunes, YouTube, or other apps as well. The Psalms are not hard to find. And if you don't want to read on your phone or listen to it with a speaker or earbuds, you can always pull out an old-fashioned Bible and read that. If you don't have one, there are plenty of places to get one for free. Simply go to my website, thefeelingbetter.com, and go to the resources page. Click on the links for free Bible. As you listen or read the Psalms, pick one that's your favorite. It may only be a line or two. Something will stick out and grab you. It might be a verse that illuminates your situation, like Psalm 39 did for me with the references to moths eating wealth. Or it might be a different psalm that promises God's comfort and strength. If you found a psalm that speaks to you when you've never heard or read a psalm before, I would love to know it. Send me an email to maria@thefeelingbetter.com. Week 2, battle plan, armor, sleep. Once upon a time, back before I'd ever known about online gambling apps or concerned myself with jackpots, I'd been a good sleeper. I'd say even a great sleeper. But gambling changed all of that. I lost so much sleep over the last several months that I have permanent bags under my eyes. You know what I'm talking about. Staying up until 3 a.m. to get that big win, crawling out of bed while your mate sleeps next to you so you can gamble more, waking up a dozen times a night with anxiety and fear. It all made for some really rough days. My work suffered, my energy level plummeted, my mental health worsened. So for the second week, we're going to fortify your armor by improving your sleep. A good sleep pattern is absolutely essential to mental well-being and positive decision-making. If you're like me and you experience insomnia and disjointed sleep while you're gambling, we're going to fix that and begin to create healthy sleep patterns. First, choose a reasonable bedtime that's earlier than when you typically go to sleep that would allow you a full 8 hours before it's time to get up. For example, for me, that was 11 p.m. So at 10:45 p.m., I would start my bedtime routine, washing my face, brushing my teeth, etc., with the intention to be in bed by 11 p.m. And if you have trouble sleeping, here are a few practical tips to help you find a peaceful, restful sleep routine. 1. I am not a physician or doctor, so I'm not giving you medical advice. But I will tell you that I personally found that taking melatonin before bed really helped me to relax. My favorite brand is one called Natural. They have a quick dissolve, strawberry-flavored tablet in different strengths. My preferred strength is 3 milligrams. Less than that doesn't work as effectively for me, and more than that makes me feel groggy the next morning. If you want to give this a try, start off at the 3 milligram dose for a while and see how it goes. I have an Amazon affiliate link on my resources page of my website if you want to try it out. If you do decide to try this, take it about 15 minutes before you crawl into bed. 2. Make your bed, people. We're all adults here. And if you don't make your bed in the morning, at the very least, make your bed before you go to sleep. I know it sounds weird, but if you have a bed with pillows that have been fluffed and blankets that have been straightened out, you'll sleep better. Do whatever you can to create a pleasant sanctuary for your sleeping area. If your bedroom is dirty, then clean it. Don't use your bedroom for work or watching TV or any other task besides sleeping. And, well, sex, of course, but you know what I mean. Take away any electronics. If you charge your phone at night and typically put it on the nightstand or close to you, stop doing that. Go put your phone in the kitchen or charge it in your office or the living room. Use blackout curtains or somehow cover your windows so that the light is minimal. Make it dark, because any kind of light can impede your sleep during the night, even if you don't realize it or think it's that bright. Use a sleep mask if you have to. And crack a window or turn down the heat. Research has shown that humans sleep better when it's cooler. There was a time when I tried a weighted blanket to see if that helped me sleep, and it just made things worse because it was so hot. Once I changed it up to a thin, old-fashioned blanket, my sleep improved dramatically. If you think it might give you a project to work on and distract you, make a plan to transform your bedroom. Change around the furniture. If you have the money, buy a plant or some new bedding or a few things to make it look aesthetically pleasing. If you're like me and gambled all your money, then at least implement the things I suggested, like cleaning it spotlessly and making your bed and taking away any light and cooling it down. 3. Use aromatherapy. Evidence shows that scents like lavender can relax and calm the mind and body. My favorite is a sleep spray by the brand Nature's Truth called Good Night. It's made with pure lavender essential oil. I spray it lightly on my pillow before I climb into bed. Again, I have some affiliate links on the resources page of my website. If you don't like the smell of lavender, find some other kind of scent. Another one I like is by a brand called Zoom Mist in the scent frankincense and myrrh. It's pricier, but I love the smell of it. It's totally calming and relaxing and a bit ethereal. If you're seriously short on cash, just go buy a candle at the dollar store. I have a couple of outdoorsy scented candles that remind me of a walk in the woods. Light it about a half hour before you go to bed, but just be sure to blow it out completely before you climb in. You don't want to risk a fire by falling asleep while it's still burning. 4. Finally, one of my favorite tips for falling asleep is using sound or guided sleep meditation. You can use a speaker or earbuds or one of those Bluetooth eye mask thingies. I know some of this might cost money and you probably don't have it. That's okay. Commit to putting aside $20 or $30 each paycheck to create your healing and recovery plan. Don't tell me you don't have it or can't afford it. Before you self-excluded at the start of this plan, you probably would have gambled much more than that on payday, right? So do this for yourself. It'll be worth it. Now, I mentioned not having your phone charging in the bedroom with you. Not only do you want to eliminate any triggers or temptations to gamble, but you just don't want to have the possibility of a distraction or disruption that could interrupt your sleep. But you may want to use sound on your phone to help you sleep better. So what I do is right before I climb into bed, I plug in my phone in the bathroom, which is right next to the bedroom, so that my Bluetooth sleep band will connect easily. Then I hit play, making sure I use a timer feature before I climb into bed. One of my favorites is an audiobook called Positive Thinking and Happy Living Sleep Affirmations, an 8-hour sleep cycle meditation by Joel Thielke and Catherine Perry. It's designed to play for a full 8 hours, but I honestly just set the sleep timer for 30 minutes because the best part is the beginning where they guide you to sleep. The audiobook costs around $18, and you can find it on Audible or iTunes. But there are a lot of free options as well. There's an app called Breathe that I really like. That's spelled Breethe. There are a bunch of sleep meditations to choose from. Another app is called Calm. That one has great reviews and is used by millions of people. And there are dozens of other free sleep apps you can try on your phone that offer meditation, nature sounds, white noise, and more. If you think you might be able to fall asleep better listening to ocean waves, try that. If you think the sounds of a steady rain or a thunderstorm might be more relaxing, give that a shot. Find something that works for you. Sometimes for me, it's just playing the Psalms as I sleep. If you only have a pair of uncomfortable earbuds that aren't conducive to sleeping on your side, then just put them in for 15 or 20 minutes while you lie on your back. Practice deep breathing while you listen to your preferred sleep sound therapy, and then pull them out right before you fall asleep. Week 2, recap. Let's review and recap the 4 battle plans we're focusing on this second week. Battle plan, the enemy's playbook. Get to know your adversary. Satan is very real. His long-term goal is to one day usurp God and take over as ruler of all things. Of course, that's not going to happen, but don't let his naivete or arrogance fool you. He's a very dangerous adversary who sees you as one of God's beloved creatures, and he will continue to tell you lies in order to bring you down and destroy you. He will convince you that you have no choice but to continue gambling. Don't believe it. Battle plan, God's intel. The truth about obedience. God wants nothing more than to see you overcome and succeed at defeating this spiritual enemy. If you're serious about quitting gambling and putting this addiction behind you once and for all, then call out to God for help. Be honest, be genuine, and be heartfelt. Most of all, though, be obedient now that you know what you must do, because disobedience is probably going to result in a lot of pain. It does not mean that God loves you any less. In fact, it's proof of his love for you. Battle plan, weaponry, Psalms. Even as you continue to use your vision album, there may be times when your heart just isn't in it, and you're feeling too much emotion to engage in creative work. Sometimes, we just need to immerse ourselves in words that depict the character of God. The Psalms are prayers, petitions, worship, and laments to God that are helpful to get us through tough times. Whether you prefer to read or listen, use Psalms as a weapon against fear, worry, or doubt. Battle plan, armor, sleep. Without adequate sleep, it's impossible to make sound decisions or feel rested enough to fight the day's battles. With a good night's sleep, the morning can look a lot brighter. Not only are you strengthening your immune system and equipping yourself with rest and recovery, but you're also giving your mind a rest. Use tools like melatonin, aromatherapy, sound therapy, and a comfortable sleeping space to help encourage a restful night's sleep. This week's Battle Box, video or podcast. Do you have the Spotify app? If not, go ahead and download it. It's free. Then do a podcast search for the After Gambling Podcast, Episode 6, The Near Miss. Jamie, the host of this gambling addiction podcast, reinforces what I said about gambling near misses and how those of us with compulsive tendencies view them differently than non-compulsive gamblers. It's a relatively short podcast, but a solid reminder that the casinos are in it to shake you down and make all the money they can off of you. Song. Do a search for the song There Will Be a Day by Jeremy Camp. Play this as often as you need to give you hope for the future. Quote, "The pain of self-discipline will never be as great as the pain of regret." Unknown. Bible verse. Those whom I love, I rebuke and discipline. So be earnest and repent. Revelation 3:19. Quick tip. The sun's light has healing powers. Whether you live in a northern climate like me or someplace where it's sunny every day, go outside whenever the sun shines and just stand or sit with your eyes closed for 10 or 15 minutes. During this time, you can listen to music or pray silently. Do not look at your phone, though. Tilt your head back, close your eyes, and let the sun's rays shine on your face. If it's warm enough, expose your arms and chest for some vitamin D. Prayer. Lord, I am so sorry for any time during this trial that I disobeyed you. I know punishment and discipline are painful. I also know the enemy is going to try to convince me to be disobedient again in the future. Give me the strength to stand up to his sneaky attacks. Speak to me through the Psalms so I can fill my heart with your goodness, your forgiveness, and your holiness. Help me to get through this week with your light guiding me forward. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen.
Like holy water, like salt on a bird, rain in a drought, it's all over now. When daylight comes over the long night, oh